The weight of the silver tray pressed against my calloused palms as I navigated through the maze of tables. Midnight at Carluccio's meant dim lighting, hushed conversations, and the constant scent of expensive cologne mixing with garlic and truffle oil. My black uniform clung to my back, damp with sweat despite the restaurant's aggressive air conditioning. 3 double shifts in a row had left my vision occasionally blurring at the edges, dark spots dancing like unwelcome party guests. "Table 7 is still waiting for their Barolo," Marco hissed as I passed the service station, not bothering to look up from his phone. As assistant manager, his primary skill seemed to be pointing out my shortcomings. "I know," I whispered, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, just delivering these appetizers first. My apartment rent was due tomorrow. The electricity had been shut off last week, and somewhere across town, my younger sister was probably wondering why I hadn't answered her texts about needing money for textbooks. The familiar weight of responsibility pressed against my chest, heavier than any tray I'd ever carried. I didn't notice him at first. Table 12 had been empty all evening, reserved but unoccupied. The kind of table Marco made sure remained pristine, just in case. Now, as I carefully arranged prosciutto-wrapped figs and arancini before a group of chattering businessmen, I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. A prickle ran down my spine, and I instinctively glanced toward the corner of the restaurant. The man sat alone, perfectly still in the shadowed booth, one hand resting on the white tablecloth. Even in profile, there was something magnetic about him. The sharp line of his jaw, the precision with which his midnight blue suit hugged broad shoulders. He couldn't have been more than 35, yet everything about him radiated authority. 2 men in dark suits stood nearby, not even pretending to be anything but guards, their eyes constantly scanning the restaurant. I quickly looked away, but not before noticing how his presence seemed to alter the very air of the room, like a sudden drop in pressure before a storm. "Earth to Emma," snapped one of the businessmen, snapping his fingers inches from my face. "More wine, sweetheart. Or are you too busy daydreaming?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. "I'm sorry, sir." Right away. As I hurried back toward the bar, I felt Marco's hand grip my elbow, his fingernails digging into my skin. "Do you have any idea who just walked in?" he whispered, eyes wide with panic. "That's Alessio Russo, the Alessio Russo." The name meant nothing to me. "I'm sorry, should I know?" "Jesus Christ, Emma. He owns half the waterfront. His family has been running." Marco cut himself off, glancing nervously toward table 12. He's important. Very important. And he asked for our best server." His lips twisted into what might have been an attempt at a smile. "So, unfortunately, that's you tonight. Don't screw this up." My stomach clenched as Marco thrust a wine list into my trembling hands. He's waiting. The distance to table 12 felt endless. Each step brought me closer to the man whose mere presence had turned Marco, perpetually condescending Marco, into a nervous wreck. The wine list shook slightly in my grip as I approached. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on a Renaissance sculpture, all angles and perfect proportions. But it was his eyes that made my breath catch, amber-flecked brown, observing me with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Good evening, sir," I managed, voice steadier than I expected. "Welcome to Carluccio's. May I tell you about our wine selection tonight?" He didn't respond immediately, just studied me with those unsettling eyes. One of his guards shifted slightly, and I noticed the subtle bulge of a weapon beneath his jacket. "What would you recommend?" His voice was unexpectedly soft, tinged with the barest hint of an Italian accent. I blinked, caught off guard by the genuine question. Most patrons like him, the ones who arrived with security and made Marco nervous, typically ordered without consultation, flaunting knowledge of rare vintages and exclusive reserves. "The 2015 Brunello di Montalcino is exceptional," I offered, falling back on the wine that had become my standard recommendation after 3 years of serving. "But if you prefer something less conventional, we just received a small allocation of Barolo from a family producer in Piedmont. It's not on the list yet." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or approval. He nodded once. "The Barolo. Bring 2 glasses. 2 glasses." I glanced around, noticing for the first time that the table was set for 2, though he was alone. "Right away, sir." As I turned to leave, A wave of dizziness washed over me. I gripped the edge of a nearby chair, waiting for it to pass. 3 days of double shifts on 4 hours of sleep per night was catching up with me. Just a few more hours, I told myself. Just get through tonight. I returned with the wine, focusing intently on not spilling as I poured a taste for him. His eyes never left my face, even as he swirled the ruby liquid and took a careful sip. "You have good taste," he said, nodding for me to fill both glasses. "Sit." The command, delivered so casually, made me freeze mid-pour. "Excuse me?" "Sit," he repeated, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Please." I glanced over at Marco, who was watching the interaction with undisguised horror. When our eyes met, he gave a small, frantic nod. "I'm afraid I'm still on shift, sir," I said carefully. The corner of his mouth twitched. "I wasn't asking your manager, I was asking you." Something in his tone made it clear this wasn't truly a request. With awkward movements, I lowered myself into the chair opposite him, hyper-aware of how out of place I looked. A waitress in a wrinkled uniform sitting at the table of the most powerful-looking man in the restaurant. He pushed the second glass of wine toward me. "I don't drink while working," I said automatically. "1 sip," he countered, "to tell me if you truly believe in your recommendation." Against my better judgment, I took the smallest possible taste. The wine was everything I'd promised. Rich, complex, with notes of tar and roses that lingered on the palate. "It's as good as I remembered," I admitted, setting the glass down firmly and making to stand. "Now, if you'll excuse me, what's your name?" he interrupted. "Emma," I answered reflexively. "Emma," he repeated, as if testing how the syllables felt in his mouth. "How long have you been working here, Emma?" The question felt invasive, but I couldn't see a way to avoid answering. 3 years. 3 years, he echoed, seeming genuinely surprised. "And how many shifts this week?" I hesitated, wondering why he cared. "This is my 8th consecutive shift." His expression darkened. 8 shifts in 7 days? The room suddenly seemed too warm. Black spots danced at the corners of my vision again, and I gripped the edge of the table. "If you'll excuse me, I should check on your food order." I stood too quickly. The restaurant tilted sideways, the floor seeming to rush up toward me. I was vaguely aware of the wine glass tipping, of reaching desperately for something to steady myself. The last thing I registered was a strong arm catching me before I hit the ground, and a voice that seemed to come from very far away. "I've got you." Then, darkness. I woke to the sound of quiet beeping and the antiseptic smell of hospital disinfectant. For a moment, I lay perfectly still, eyes closed, trying to piece together what had happened. Fragments came back slowly. The weight of the tray, the corner table, amber eyes watching me intently, the floor rushing up to meet me. "She's awake," came a low voice. Unfamiliar, male. I forced my eyes open. The hospital room was private and unexpectedly luxurious, with a window overlooking city lights. An IV ran into my arm, and a monitor displayed my heart rate and blood pressure. And there he was, Alessio Russo, sitting in a chair beside my bed, jacket removed, shirt sleeves rolled up to expose muscular forearms. His guards stood by the door, faces impassive. Fear and confusion collided in my chest. Why are you—" "Severe dehydration, exhaustion, and hypoglycemia," he said, answering the question I hadn't asked. "You collapsed in my restaurant." "Your restaurant?" My voice came out raspy. "Carluccio's isn't—" "It is," he interrupted smoothly. "Along with 12 others across the city. I acquired the chain last month." I struggled to process this information. "But Marco never mentioned—" "Marco," Alessio said, his expression hardening, "has been relieved of his position." A cold weight settled in my stomach. "Because of me? Because I made a scene? Please, I need that job, I can't—" "Because he allowed a valuable employee to work herself to the point of collapse," he cut in, voice sharp. "Because he failed to ensure proper break schedules and created a hostile work environment. The owner before me may have tolerated such mismanagement, but I do not." My head was spinning. "And not just from dehydration. I don't understand why you're here. Why am I in this room? I don't have insurance that would cover—" "You don't need to concern yourself with a bill." He leaned forward, those intense eyes fixed on mine. What you need to concern yourself with is recovery. And then a new position. New position? I echoed weakly. You're being promoted, he said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Effective immediately, you're the new manager of Carluccio's. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. That's not possible. I'm just a server. I don't have management experience. You have 3 years of experience in my restaurant, working under incompetent leadership, and you still manage to develop an impressive knowledge of wine and maintain exemplary service standards. He stated this as if reciting facts from a file. More importantly, you have something Marco lacked: integrity and work ethic. The monitor beside me registered my accelerating heart rate. This doesn't make any sense. You don't know anything about me. For the first time, a genuine smile touched his lips, transforming his face into something almost boyish. I know more than you think, Emma Hayes. 26 years old, supporting a younger sister through college after your parents died 4 years ago in a car accident. Working 3 jobs until recently. Behind on rent for your apartment on Westlake Avenue. Ice flooded my veins. How do you... You collapsed in my arms, he said simply. Did you expect me not to find out who you are? The casual invasion of privacy rendered me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice again, it shook with anger and fear. So what is this? Charity? Or do you expect something in return? His expression shuddered, became unreadable. This is business, Emma. I need competent people running my establishments. You've proven your capability through years of dedication despite poor management. And if I refuse? Why would you refuse a substantial salary increase, benefits, and regular hours? He tilted his head slightly. Unless you enjoy working yourself to the point of hospitalization? Put that way, it sounded ridiculous to object, yet something about this entire situation felt wrong, too convenient, too contrived. People like Alessio Russo didn't promote random waitresses who collapsed at their feet. Why me? I asked finally. Really? He was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice had softened. Because when I asked about wine, you didn't recite the most expensive option to inflate the bill. Because you've worked for 3 years under a manager who took credit for your ideas. Because despite everything, you still care about doing things right. He paused. And perhaps because I recognize something in you that reminds me of myself, once. Before I could respond, the door opened, and a doctor entered, clipboard in hand. Alessio stood smoothly. Think about it, he said. I'll return tomorrow. As he moved toward the door, flanked by his silent guardians, he paused, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Oh, and Emma, when you return to Carluccio's, remember what I told you when you first opened your eyes. I frowned, trying to remember. You didn't say anything when I woke up. A smile played at the corners of his mouth. Not here. In the restaurant, before the ambulance came. You regained consciousness briefly. His amber eyes held mine. You're the boss here now. That's what I said. I meant it. With that, he was gone, leaving me alone with a bewildered doctor and the unsettling feeling that my life had just veered dramatically off course. All because I'd fainted at the feet of a man who was clearly much more dangerous than he appeared. Sleep evaded me that night, despite exhaustion saturating every cell in my body. The hospital room, though luxurious by medical standards, felt like a gilded cage. I stared at the ceiling, replaying my interaction with Alessio Russo, searching for hidden motives between his carefully chosen words. By morning, when the doctor arrived with discharge papers, I'd convinced myself the entire promotion offer was a fever dream, the delusion of an overworked mind. But then I saw the name on the insurance documents, Russo Holdings. You're good to go, Ms. Hayes, the doctor said, checking my vitals one last time, though I strongly recommend at least 3 days of rest before returning to work. Thank you, I murmured, accepting the papers with trembling hands. Did Mr. Russo leave any messages for me? The doctor's expression shifted subtly. He arranged for your transportation home. There's a car waiting outside. Sure enough, a sleek black Audi idled at the hospital entrance, a driver standing at attention beside the rear door. As I approached, clutching my bag of belongings, he nodded respectfully. "Ms. Hayes, Mr. Russo sends his regards and asks that you take the rest of the week to recover." He opened the door in a fluid motion. "He'll contact you on Monday regarding your return to Carluccio's." The leather seats enveloped me like butter as the car pulled away from the curb. Through the tinted windows, I watched the city slide by, first the medical district, then downtown, and finally my neighborhood with its mix of century-old buildings and neglected infrastructure. The contrast between this luxury vehicle and my surroundings couldn't have been starker. When we reached my apartment building, the driver insisted on escorting me to my door. I fumbled with my keys, acutely aware of the peeling paint and the flickering hallway light that maintenance had promised to fix months ago. "Ms. Hayes," the driver said before departing, extending a crisp envelope. "From Mr. Russo." Alone in my tiny apartment, I tore it open with unsteady fingers. Inside was a check with an amount that made me sink onto my worn sofa in disbelief, along with a handwritten note: "An advance on your new salary. Rest, recover. We'll speak Monday. A.R." I ran my fingers over the elegant script, searching for some sign that this was an elaborate prank. The amount would cover my rent, the overdue electricity bill, and my sister's textbooks with plenty to spare. It was exactly what I needed, suspiciously so. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "How's work?" "You never answered about the books." Guilt twisted in my stomach. I hadn't told her about my collapse or hospital stay. She had enough to worry about with midterms approaching. I texted back, "Sorry, crazy shifts. Don't worry about the books. Money coming your way tomorrow. Love you." Her response was immediate. "OMG, what? Did you rob a bank? Details." I smiled despite myself. "Got a promotion. Tell you everything this weekend." Setting my phone aside, I wandered to the window, gazing out at the sliver of city skyline visible between adjacent buildings. Somewhere out there, Alessio Russo was going about his day, making decisions that affected countless lives, including mine now. The thought sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. What did he really want from me? Monday arrived with dreary Seattle rain and a text message from an unknown number. Car, arriving at 9:30. AR. I'd spent the weekend oscillating between gratitude and suspicion, researching everything I could find about Alessio Russo. The results were frustratingly vague. Legitimate businessman, restaurateur, real estate investor. There were whispers of family connections to old-world crime syndicates, but nothing concrete. Just the sort of rumors that followed any successful Italian-American with security personnel and a commanding presence. At precisely 9:30, a different black car pulled up outside my building. The same driver held an umbrella for me as I slid into the back seat, heart hammering against my ribs. Instead of Carluccio's, we drove to a towering glass building downtown. The driver led me through a private entrance to an express elevator that required a key card. "Mr. Russo is expecting you," he said, as the doors opened directly into a stunning office suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. Alessio stood by the windows, his back to me, hands clasped behind him. The morning light silhouetted his tall frame, casting him in dramatic contrast. Without turning, he spoke. "What did you think of the check, Emma?" His use of my first name sent an unexpected jolt through me. "It was generous. It was fair," he countered, finally turning to face me. Today he wore a charcoal suit that fit him as if it had been poured onto his frame. Perhaps even inadequate compensation for years of underpayment. I squared my shoulders, determined not to be intimidated in this tower of wealth and power. "Why am I here instead of at the restaurant?" He gestured to a seating area where a coffee service waited. "Because managing Carluccio's is only the beginning. Please sit." I perched on the edge of a leather armchair, declining the coffee he offered. "The beginning of what, exactly?" "Your new career." He sat across from me, completely at ease. "I'm restructuring the management of my restaurant group. I need people I can trust." "You don't know me," I pointed out, echoing my words from the hospital. "I know enough." His amber eyes studied me with that same unsettling intensity. "You have integrity, resilience, and exceptional observational skills. You recognize the quality of that Barolo without formal training. You've survived difficult circumstances without compromising your principles. You had me investigated, I said flatly. A slight smile touched his lips. Of course I did. I investigate everyone who works for me. I don't work for you yet. I haven't accepted anything, haven't you? He nodded toward my purse where the deposited check receipt lay. You cashed the advance. Heat rushed to my face. I have bills. That doesn't mean I've agreed to, Emma. The way he said my name, soft but commanding, halted my protest. I'm offering you opportunity, not obligation. If you wish to walk away, the door is there. Keep the money. Consider it compensation for your mistreatment under previous management. For a moment, I considered it, standing, walking out, returning to the life I knew. Difficult but predictable, safe in its own way. But then what? More double shifts? More choosing between electricity and proper meals? More watching my sister struggle while I worked myself into collapse? What exactly would this job entail? I asked finally. Something flickered in his eyes, satisfaction perhaps. Initially, managing Carluccio's, restructuring staff, improving service protocols, revitalizing the menu with the executive chef. Once that's running smoothly, overseeing the implementation of those changes across other locations. It sounded reasonable, challenging, but within the realm of possibility. And my qualifications? I pressed. I've never managed anything. You've been unofficially managing for years, picking up slack for incompetent supervisors. He leaned forward slightly. You know the business from the ground up. That's more valuable than an MBA with no practical experience. A thought occurred to me. Is this how you started, working your way up through restaurants? Something darkened in his expression, a shadow passing over those amber depths. My path was different. Family business. He didn't elaborate. The silence stretched between us, weighted with unspoken histories. Finally, I asked the question that had been haunting me since the hospital. Why me? Really? Out of all the people who work in your restaurants, why single out a waitress who happened to faint at your table? He considered me for a long moment, because in that moment before you collapsed, when you recommended the Barolo despite it offering you no advantage, I saw something rare, authenticity. In my world, Emma, genuine people are more precious than gold. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. For the first time, I allowed myself to consider that perhaps his interest wasn't sinister, that maybe, just maybe, this was the lucky break I'd stopped believing in years ago. When would I start? The words left my mouth before I'd fully committed to them. His smile transformed his face again, creating a startling contrast to his usual intensity. Today. Right now. He pressed an intercom button. Send in Anthony. Moments later, a door opened, and a man entered, early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the confident bearing of someone comfortable in corporate settings. Emma, this is Anthony Vega, my hospitality director. He'll walk you through everything you need to know about your new position. Alessio stood, buttoning his jacket in one smooth motion. I have another meeting, but I'll check in later today at Carluccio's. As he moved toward the door where his security detail waited, he paused beside my chair, his hand lightly touching my shoulder. The contact, though brief, sent warmth cascading through me. Remember, Emma, he said, voice pitched for my ears alone. You earned this. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Then he was gone, leaving me with Anthony and the lingering sensation of his touch on my shoulder. The next 6 hours passed in a whirlwind of information, employee files, vendor contracts, profit and loss statements, scheduling protocols. Anthony was thorough and surprisingly patient with my questions. Mr. Russo has a good eye for talent, he remarked as we reviewed the restaurant's finances over lunch. But this is unusual, even for him. Unusual how? I asked, trying to sound casual. Anthony gave me a measured look. He doesn't typically take such personal interest in staffing decisions below executive level. Before I could press for more details, his phone buzzed. Mr. Russo wants us at Carluccio's now. The staff has been informed of the management change. My stomach clenched. I'd been so consumed with paperwork and procedures that I hadn't considered facing my former coworkers as their new boss. The restaurant was quiet when we arrived, the afternoon lull between lunch and dinner service. The staff had been assembled in the dining area, servers, bartenders, line cooks, dishwashers, all watching with varying degrees of curiosity and resentment as Anthony introduced me as the new manager. "Some of you already know Emma," he concluded. "She's been promoted based on her years of dedicated service and her intimate knowledge of Carluccio's operations. Mr. Russo has complete confidence in her ability to lead this team." The silence that followed was deafening. I recognized the expressions on their faces, the same mixture of confusion and suspicion I'd felt in the hospital room. "Thank you, Anthony," I said, finding my voice. "I know this is unexpected. I was as surprised as you are." I scanned the familiar faces. "I've worked alongside most of you for years. I know your strengths because I've witnessed them firsthand. I also know the challenges we've faced under previous management." A few nodded cautiously. Encouraged, I continued. "My door will always be open. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but I promise to listen to your concerns and ideas. This is still our restaurant. We just have better support now." As I spoke, I noticed movement near the entrance. Alessio had arrived with 2 of his guards, standing silently at the back of the room, watching the proceedings with those penetrating eyes. After the meeting dispersed, with Anthony taking kitchen staff for separate briefings, Alessio approached me. "You handled that well," he said, genuine approval in his voice. "They think I slept with you to get this job," I replied bluntly, keeping my voice low. He didn't flinch at my candor. "And does that bother you?" "Of course it does. Why? You and I know the truth." I stared at him, incredulous. "Because respect has to be earned, and rumors like that undermine my authority before I've even started." A slow smile spread across his face. "Exactly right. So what will you do about it?" I realized he was testing me. "Prove them wrong through actions, not words. Show them I'm qualified through results." He nodded once, satisfied. "Your office is this way." He led me to what had been Marco's domain, a small room adjacent to the wine cellar. But where Marco's office had been cluttered and disorganized, this space had been completely transformed. New furniture, state-of-the-art computer equipment, even the lighting had been upgraded. "When did you do all this?" I asked, running my fingers over the smooth surface of the desk. "Yesterday." He shrugged, as if completely renovating an office overnight was trivial. The old setup wasn't suitable. As I took in the space, my space now, the reality of everything began to sink in. 24 hours ago, I'd been a waitress living paycheck to paycheck. Now I was managing a high-end restaurant, reporting directly to a man whose very presence made rooms fall silent. "This is really happening," I murmured, more to myself than to him. "It is." He moved closer, his proximity sending that same inexplicable warmth through my body. "Are you ready?" Looking into those amber eyes, I realized the question carried weight beyond the immediate context of the restaurant. Whatever game Alessio Russo was playing, I was now a piece on his board. "Yes," I answered, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I'm ready." Something flashed in his eyes, approval, satisfaction, perhaps something deeper. He reached out, adjusting a pen on my desk that was slightly askew. "I'll check in tomorrow," he said, voice dropping to that intimate tone that seemed reserved for me alone. "Call if you need anything, any time." As he turned to leave, one of his guards leaned in, whispering something urgent. Alessio's expression hardened instantly, the warmth vanishing like fog in sunlight. "Secure the perimeter," he ordered, his voice now cold steel, "and get her a protection detail, now." Fear sliced through me. What's happening? He turned back to me, conflict evident in his expression. "A complication. Nothing for you to worry about." But the sudden appearance of another security guard at my office door told a different story. Whatever was happening, it had something to do with me, and it was dangerous enough to put Alessio Russo on high alert. Night fell over Carluccio's, bringing with it the dinner rush and the surreal experience of overseeing service rather than participating in it. I moved between tables with a new perspective, observing patterns I'd never noticed as a server. Which staff members anticipated guest needs, which ones needed guidance, how the rhythm of the kitchen affected timing in the dining room. All the while, I remained acutely aware of the security guard positioned near the entrance. His presence was subtle enough not to alarm customers, but obvious enough to remind me of Alessio's cryptic warning, "Emma." The hostess approached, her expression tense. "There's someone asking for you, says he's an old friend, but I don't recognize him." My pulse quickened. "Name?" "Michael Donovan. Said you'd know him." The name meant nothing to me. "What does he look like?" "Mid-30s, expensive suit. Very insistent." She hesitated, kind of intense. I glanced toward the security guard, who had already straightened, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket. "Tell him I'm in a meeting. Get his contact information." She nodded and hurried back to the front. Minutes later she returned, looking relieved. "He left when I asked for his number. Said he'd come back another time." The security guard was already on his phone, speaking in hushed tones. I caught fragments. Unknown male, claiming acquaintance, left premises. By closing time, my nerves were frayed from the combination of first-day stresses and the mysterious visitor. As the last customers departed and staff began cleanup, the guard approached. "Ms. Hayes, I've been instructed to escort you home tonight." "That's not necessary," I began, but his expression made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. "Mr. Russo was explicit about your safety." He handed me a small card with a number. "This connects directly to security. Mr. Russo asks that you use it if anything seems unusual." The drive to my apartment was tense, the guard constantly checking mirrors and scanning intersections. At my building, he insisted on escorting me to my door and checking my apartment before leaving. "Lock everything," he instructed. "Don't open for anyone you don't recognize." Alone in my apartment, I sank onto the sofa, the day's events crashing over me like a wave. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number I now recognized as Alessio's. "All quiet?" I typed back, "Yes." "Who is Michael Donovan?" The response came quickly. "No one you should concern yourself with. How was your first day?" The deflection was obvious, but I played along. Overwhelming. But good. "Thank you for the opportunity." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "You're welcome. Get some rest. Car will arrive at 8:30 tomorrow." I stared at the message, trying to decipher the man behind these carefully measured words. Eventually, exhaustion won out, and I drifted into uneasy sleep. Morning brought rain again, washing the city in shades of gray. The promised car arrived precisely on time, but instead of the driver from yesterday, Alessio himself waited inside. "Good morning," he said as I slid into the back seat, surprise evident on my face. "I thought we might discuss strategy on the way." He looked immaculate as always, his tailored suit a deep navy that made his amber eyes more pronounced. A faint scent surrounded him, something expensive and subtle, like cedar and spice. "Strategy for what, exactly?" I asked, trying to ignore how the enclosed space of the car amplified his presence. "Managing potential obstacles." His eyes met mine, serious and direct. "Your promotion has created ripples." "Because of Michael Donovan?" I pressed. Alessio's expression remained neutral, but I noticed a slight tightening around his eyes. "Donovan is a business associate with whom I have differences of opinion. His appearance yesterday was a message to me, not you. A message saying what? That he's aware of my interest in Carluccio's, and in its new manager." His gaze was penetrating. "Some people don't appreciate change, Emma, especially when it threatens established arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" The question escaped before I could consider its wisdom. A shadow crossed his face. The previous management at Carluccio's had certain agreements with local entities. Favorable tables without reservations, special treatment for certain guests, cash transactions that didn't always reach the books. Understanding dawned. Money laundering? Among other things. He looked out the window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass. "I've been cleaning up operations since acquiring the restaurants. Not everyone appreciates the new transparency." The implications sent a chill through me. "Am I in danger?" His eyes snapped back to mine. "No, not while you're under my protection." The certainty in his voice should have been reassuring, but instead raised new questions about exactly what kind of man held such confidence in his ability to ensure safety in apparently dangerous circumstances. "Is that what I am? Under your protection?" The words came out more challenging than I'd intended. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, at my directness. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. "You're under my employment, Emma. The protection is a courtesy I extend to all my key personnel, but the security detail, the personal texts, showing up this morning instead of sending a driver, that's standard for all your managers?" The car slowed as we approached Carluccio's. Instead of answering immediately, Alessio studied me with those unsettling eyes. "No," he finally admitted. "That's not standard." Before I could pursue this revelation, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening instantly. "Change of plans," he told the driver. "Take us to the penthouse office." "What's wrong?" I asked as the car smoothly reversed direction. "A situation that requires attention." His voice had shifted to that steel-cold tone from yesterday. "Nothing for you to worry about. It clearly involves me if I'm being redirected." He glanced at me, something like approval flashing in his eyes. "Observant. Yes, it concerns you tangentially. We've received information that Donovan has been asking questions about you. Background, history, connections to me." My stomach tightened. Why would he care about a restaurant manager? "Because you're not just a restaurant manager to him." Alessio's jaw tightened. "You're leverage." The remainder of the drive passed in tense silence. At the downtown building, we bypassed the office suite I'd visited yesterday, instead taking the elevator to the top floor, a penthouse that combined luxurious living space with what appeared to be a private command center. Men in suits moved with military precision, speaking in hushed tones. Multiple screens displayed what looked like security footage from various locations, including, I realized with a jolt, the exterior of my apartment building. "You've been watching my home?" I demanded, anger overriding fear. Alessio guided me to a quiet corner, his hand at the small of my back. "Since yesterday, for your protection, that's necessary," he cut in, voice firm but not unkind. "Donovan is not someone who respects boundaries." "And you do?" I challenged. His eyes darkened. "I respect what's mine." The possessive statement hung between us, charged and ambiguous. Before I could respond, a man approached with a tablet. "Sir, we've got confirmation. Donovan's men have been surveilling both the restaurant and Ms. Hayes' residence since Tuesday." Tuesday, the day I'd fainted, the day Alessio had first spoken to me. "Increase security at all locations," Alessio ordered. "And prepare the Harbor Island property." The man nodded and retreated. Alessio turned back to me, his expression grave. "Emma, I need you to listen carefully. Michael Donovan is dangerous, not in the way people think I am, with rules and codes, but unpredictably, personally dangerous. He sees my interest in you as an opportunity. Your interest in me," I repeated slowly. "What exactly is the nature of that interest, Mr. Russo?" Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the edges that transformed his face. "Alessio," he corrected gently. "And that's a conversation for another time." "No," I insisted, finding courage from somewhere deep inside. "That's a conversation for now. I've been swept into something I don't understand, with security guards and surveillance and mysterious threats. I deserve to know why." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well." He gestured to a seating area overlooking the bay. "The truth, then." We sat across from each other, the panoramic view of Seattle's waterfront spread before us like a living painting. Alessio leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. "My family has been in this city for 3 generations, he began, voice quiet but intense. "We built businesses, created opportunities, protected our interests, sometimes by methods outside conventional law." "You're saying you're in the Mafia," I stated bluntly. A shadow of a smile touched his lips. "The media loves that term. The reality is more complex. My grandfather came from Sicily with certain traditions. My father continued some of those traditions while establishing legitimate enterprises. When I took control 5 years ago after his death, I accelerated the transition to completely legitimate operations. But not everyone approved, I guessed. No. Men like Donovan preferred the old ways, more profitable, less scrutiny. When I began acquiring businesses like Carluccio's and cleaning up their operations, It threatened arrangements that had existed for decades. And where do I fit into this? His amber eyes held mine. You were unexpected, Emma. I went to Carluccio's that night for a routine inspection of a new acquisition. I wasn't looking for anything beyond business, but then there was you. His voice softened. Exhausted, clearly underappreciated, yet still maintaining standards and integrity. When you recommended that Barolo instead of pushing the most expensive wine, I was intrigued. When you collapsed and I caught you, I felt... He paused, seemingly searching for the right word. Responsible? I suggested. Protective, he corrected. Then I learned more about you. Your history, your struggles, your unwavering support of your sister despite your circumstances. I recognized something in you that I value above all else. Loyalty, I said quietly. His eyes widened slightly. Yes, exactly. And strength, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that endures. So you promoted me because you admired my character? Partially. He hesitated. But there's more. When I help someone, truly help them, not just with money but with opportunity, I expect loyalty in return. I wanted you in my circle, Emma. I wanted someone I could trust running Carluccio's. And now? His expression shifted again, becoming more intense. Now, I want to keep you safe from Donovan, who sees my interest in you, however professional, as a vulnerability he can exploit. The pieces began fitting together, the security, the texts, the personal attention. You think he'll try to use me to get to you? I know he will. Alessio's voice hardened, which is why I need you to temporarily relocate to a secure property. You want me to go into hiding? I stared at him in disbelief. I have a job, the job you gave me. I have responsibilities, my sister, all of which can be managed remotely for a short time. He reached across the space between us, his hand covering mine. The contact sent warmth spreading up my arm. Emma, I wouldn't ask if it weren't necessary. The sincerity in his voice was disarming. I looked down at his hand on mine, strong, with an unexpected gentleness in his touch. How long? A few days, a week at most. Just until we resolve the situation with Donovan. And how exactly do you plan to resolve it? I asked, suddenly afraid of the answer. He withdrew his hand slowly. Legally. Despite what you may think, I don't resort to violence unless absolutely necessary. Donovan and I will come to an understanding. Something in his tone, a cold certainty, made me shiver. This man, with his elegant suits and refined manners, possessed a dangerous edge I was only beginning to comprehend. I need time to think, I said finally. He nodded, respecting my hesitation. Of course, but not too much time. Every hour increases the risk. As if to emphasize his point, one of his men approached urgently. Sir, we have movement at the apartment building. Alessio was on his feet instantly, moving toward the monitors. I followed, heart racing. On the screen, 2 men in unmarked maintenance uniforms were entering my building. The timestamp showed this was happening now, in real time. They're not building staff, confirmed the security officer. We checked the schedule. Alessio's expression hardened into something terrifying. Intercept them, now, he turned to me, all pretense of casual conversation gone. Pack a bag, you're leaving immediately. The cold command in his voice should have angered me. Instead, watching the strangers enter my building with unknown intentions sent fear coursing through my veins. What about my sister? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. His expression softened fractionally. Where is she? University of Washington. She lives in the dorms. He nodded to one of his men. Arrange protection for Ms. Hayes's sister. Discreet but thorough. Turning back to me, he added gently, she'll be safe. You have my word. It was strange how quickly I'd come to believe him when he spoke with that tone, as if his word was an unbreakable covenant. Okay, I said finally. I'll go to your safe house, but I want daily updates on my sister, on the restaurant, and on the situation with Donovan. A smile touched his lips, genuine, almost proud. Not many people make demands of me, Emma Hayes. I'm not asking for much. No, you're not. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to that intimate tone that seemed reserved for me alone. Which is why you'll get exactly what you've asked for, and more. The promise lingered between us, laden with meanings I wasn't ready to explore. Beyond the windows, rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing away the ordinary world I'd inhabited just days ago, before I fainted into the arms of a man who was rapidly becoming both my protector and my greatest unknown. The safe house was nothing like I had imagined. I'd envisioned something Spartan and hidden, perhaps a nondescript apartment with security features. What I found instead was a stunning waterfront property on Harbor Island, with panoramic views of the Seattle skyline, the kind of place featured in architectural magazines. "This is your idea of lying low?" I asked, as Alessio's security chief, Vincent, led me through the glass and cedar structure. Vincent's stoic expression didn't change. "The property isn't registered under Mr. Russo's name. The security system is military grade. The windows are bulletproof." He gestured to a panel near the entryway. "This controls everything. Lights, temperature, security alerts. The house is fully stocked with food and necessities." I wandered toward the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching ferries cross Elliott Bay. The space felt simultaneously exposed and impenetrable. All that glass creating an illusion of vulnerability while offering a strategic view of any approach. "How long has Alessio owned this place?" I asked, running my fingers along the smooth quartz countertop in the kitchen. "Mr. Russo acquired it 3 years ago," Vincent replied. "He uses it occasionally for high-security meetings or when international associates visit, and now for hiding waitresses," I murmured. A ghost of a smile touched Vincent's usually impassive face. "Former waitresses, current restaurant managers." He completed the tour efficiently, showing me the security features, communication protocols, and the fully equipped home office where I could remotely manage Carluccio's operations. 2 female security personnel would remain on site at all times, with male counterparts patrolling the perimeter. "Mr. Russo will be here this evening," Vincent informed me as he prepared to leave. "He has some matters to attend to first." "Matters concerning Michael Donovan?" I asked. Vincent's expression revealed nothing. "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Russo's schedule." After he departed, leaving me with the 2 female guards who maintained a respectful distance, I explored the house more thoroughly. The master suite was clearly Alessio's occasional domain, the closet containing several suits and shirts in his size, the bathroom stocked with his preferred toiletries. I'd been given the guest suite, which was luxurious in its own right but felt less personal. I found myself drawn to the bookshelves in the living area, scanning titles that ranged from Italian classics to modern business theory to, surprisingly, poetry. Running my fingers along the spines, I tried to construct a picture of Alessio from these fragments. The books he read, the art he chose for his walls, the space he created for himself away from the world. As sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, colors that reminded me of his eyes, I settled at the desk in the home office and logged into Carluccio's systems remotely. Work would keep my mind occupied, distracted from the surreal turn my life had taken. I was deep in inventory analysis when I heard the security system announce an arrival. Moments later, Alessio appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the hallway light. He'd loosened his tie and removed his jacket, giving him a slightly less formal appearance than usual. "You're working," he observed, a note of approval in his voice. I closed the laptop. "It helps me think. How's my sister?" "Safe. We've assigned plainclothes security to her dormitory area." He moved into the room, perching on the edge of the desk. "She hasn't noticed them, and won't, unless there's a threat." "And my apartment?" His expression darkened. "The men were Donovans. They placed surveillance devices in your home." A cold shudder ran through me at the thought of strangers violating my personal space. What were they looking for? Information. Leverage. Anything to understand my interest in you. His jaw tightened. "They've been removed. Your apartment has been secured and cleaned of all devices. And Donovan?" Alessio's eyes met mine, his gaze steady. "We're meeting tomorrow." "To discuss what, exactly? Terms?" The single word carried weight, like a stone dropped into still water. "He needs to understand certain boundaries." "Boundaries concerning me?" Alessio studied me for a moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. Yes, among other business matters. I stood, suddenly unable to remain still. This is insane. A week ago I was a waitress with normal problems. Bills, exhaustion, a crappy boss. Now I'm in a safe house because a Mafia boss is meeting with his rival about… What? Ownership rights to me? You are not property, Emma, Alessio said sharply, standing as well. No one owns you. Then what am I? Why am I here? Why does Donovan care about me? Alessio stepped closer, his proximity sending that now familiar warmth through my body despite my agitation. You're here because I protect what matters to me. Donovan cares because he's observed my attention toward you, and in our world, personal connections can be weaponized. Is that what I am to you? A personal connection? The question emerged more vulnerable than I'd intended. His amber eyes darkened as they held mine. What do you think? I think you're not someone who acts without purpose, I said carefully. Every move is calculated. The question is, what's the calculation that brought me here? A hint of a smile touched his lips. Not everything I do is calculated, Emma. His voice dropped lower. Some things are instinctive. The word hung between us, charged with meaning. I became acutely aware of our proximity, of the subtle scent of his cologne, of how the fading daylight cast shadows across the planes of his face. Like catching me when I fell, I said softly. Like that, he agreed. And like this. His hand rose slowly, giving me ample time to step away if I wished. When I remained still, he gently tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. The touch was feather-light, but sent electricity coursing through me. I should check on dinner, he said suddenly, withdrawing his hand. You must be hungry. The abrupt shift left me momentarily disoriented. Yes, I could eat. In the kitchen, Alessio moved with unexpected confidence, retrieving ingredients from the refrigerator and pantries. I watched in surprise as he efficiently chopped vegetables and heated olive oil in a pan. You cook? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. He glanced up with a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. My mother insisted all her children learn. She said a man who can't feed himself is always at someone else's mercy. Your mother sounds wise. She was. A shadow crossed his expression. Cancer. 8 years ago. I'm sorry. The simple condolence felt inadequate, but his nod of acknowledgement suggested he understood the sentiment behind it. As he continued preparing what appeared to be a traditional Italian pasta dish, I gathered the courage to ask more personal questions. You said children. Do you have siblings? A brother and sister, both younger. He added garlic to the pan, the aromatic scent filling the kitchen. My brother runs our legitimate businesses on the East Coast. My sister is a doctor in Chicago. Far from the family business, I observed. By design. I wanted her completely separate from our world. He glanced at me. My father disagreed. It was our first major conflict when I took over. I leaned against the counter, watching his confident movements. You took over young, didn't you? 28? Too young, many thought. He worked as he spoke, his hands never idle. My father's death was unexpected. Heart attack during a business dinner. That must have been difficult. He was quiet for a moment, focused on the task before him. It was complicated. My father and I had different visions for the future of our enterprises. His death forced an acceleration of changes I had planned to implement gradually. Changes like legitimizing operations? His eyes met mine, sharp and assessing. Yes. My father believed in traditional methods. I saw a future where our strength came from legitimate power. Real estate, hospitality, shipping, and others, like Donovan, preferred your father's ways, precisely. He drained the pasta, combining it with the sauce in a practiced motion. Michael Donovan was my father's contemporary. He views my reforms as weakness, my legitimate businesses as distractions. And me? Alessio paused, wooden spoon in hand. You he views as evidence of a fatal flaw, sentiment. In his world, caring for someone is tantamount to creating a hostage. The blunt assessment sent a chill through me. Is he right? Alessio resumed his cooking, his movements more measured now. There was a time when I would have agreed with him. When I first took control, I kept everyone at a distance. No serious relationships, no close friendships outside the family, nothing that could be leveraged against me. And now? I pressed. He plated the pasta with the precision of a chef, garnishing it with fresh herbs. Now I'm beginning to think that approach has its own cost. Isolation may prevent certain vulnerabilities, but it creates others. We moved to the dining table, where he poured wine, a Barolo, I noted with a small smile, and we began to eat. The pasta was exceptional, rich with flavors that spoke of authentic Italian cooking. "This is amazing," I admitted after several bites. He looked pleased. "My mother's recipe. She was from a small village outside Naples." "Tell me about her," I requested, genuinely curious about the woman who had shaped this complex man. As we ate, Alessio spoke of his mother, her strength, her wisdom, how she had maintained a sense of normalcy for her children despite the family's unconventional business. He described Sunday dinners where business was forbidden as a topic, and how she had insisted he attend university, despite his father's belief that practical experience was more valuable. "She would have liked you," he said suddenly, catching me off guard. "Why do you say that?" "Your resilience. Your loyalty to your sister." His eyes held mine. "Your refusal to be intimidated by power." I laughed softly. "Is that what you think? That I'm not intimidated by you? Are you?" The question was genuine. His head tilted slightly as he studied me. I considered it honestly. "I'm cautious, aware of who you are, what you represent. But no, not intimidated in the way you mean. Explain." I traced the rim of my wine glass, gathering my thoughts. "You have power. Obvious power. Security details, properties like this, the ability to make people disappear from jobs overnight. But power itself doesn't frighten me. The abuse of power does, and you're waiting to see if I'll abuse mine." It wasn't a question. "I'm waiting to understand why you've directed it toward me," I clarified. "Why a man like you would take interest in a waitress who fainted at his table." Alessio set down his fork, his full attention now on me. "I told you before." "You gave me partial truths," I interrupted. "Business justifications. I want the real reason." For a moment, I thought I'd pushed too far. His expression became unreadable, his posture perfectly still in that way that suggested controlled power. Then, surprising me, he smiled. "You're remarkably direct for someone in your position." "My position being under my protection," he supplied. "Most people would be more deferential." "If you wanted deference, you chose the wrong waitress to catch." His laugh was unexpected and genuine, transforming his face completely. "Evidently." He refilled our glasses, his movements elegant and precise. "The real reason, then." He leaned back, amber eyes holding mine. "When you collapsed and I caught you, something shifted. You were vulnerable but not weak. There's a difference. I found myself concerned for you in a way that went beyond the professional. When I learned more about you, your circumstances, your character, that concern deepened." "Into what?" I asked softly. "Interest. Admiration." He paused, then added with careful precision, "Desire." The word hung between us, charged and dangerous. My heart accelerated, blood rushing to my face. "That's a complication neither of us needs," I managed finally. "I agree," he said, surprising me again, "which is why I created a professional framework for our association. The promotion was merited, your qualifications are genuine, but I won't pretend my personal interest didn't accelerate the process." His honesty was disarming. "And now? What do you want from me now, Alessio?" The use of his first name seemed to please him. "Right now? Your safety. Beyond that." He hesitated. "I want the chance to know you better, without pressure or expectation. At your pace, not mine." It was perhaps the most normal thing he'd said to me, a request that could have come from any man interested in any woman. Yet coming from him, with his power and position, it carried different weight. "And if I say no, then you remain Carluccio's manager, with all the benefits and security that entails, for as long as you wish. Your career path would be determined by your performance, not your personal choices." I studied him, searching for signs of deception or manipulation. You'd accept that? Just a professional relationship? I wouldn't like it, he admitted with unexpected candor. But yes, I would accept it. What I won't accept is putting you at risk because of my interest, which is why you're here until the situation with Donovan is resolved. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression immediately hardening. What's wrong? I asked, recognizing the shift. Donovan has moved up our meeting tonight. He stood, already messaging someone on his phone. I need to go. Anxiety twisted in my stomach. Is that safe? His expression softened momentarily. Your concern is noted. He hesitated, then added, Stay in the house. The security team has instructions. I'll return as soon as I can. As he moved toward the door, I followed. Alessio, I called, stopping him. Be careful. He turned, something intense flickering in his amber eyes. Always. Then, with a nod to the security team, left alone with the remains of our dinner and 2 silent guards maintaining a respectful distance, I moved to the windows, watching his car disappear into the night. The Seattle skyline glittered across the water, beautiful and distant, like the normal life I'd inhabited just days ago. Whatever happened at that meeting with Donovan would determine not just Alessio's fate, but mine as well. Our lives had become entangled in ways I couldn't have imagined when I'd first looked up to see those amber eyes watching me across Carluccio's dining room. I touched the window, cool glass beneath my fingertips, and wondered if I'd made a terrible mistake in allowing myself to be drawn into Alessio Russo's dangerous, seductive world, or if, perhaps, it was the first right decision I'd made in years. Sleep eluded me as midnight came and went with no word from Alessio. I paced the living room, checking my phone obsessively, jumping at every distant sound that carried across the water. The female security guards maintained their vigilant positions, their calm professionalism offering little reassurance. Does he often do this? I finally asked one of them, Diane. She'd introduced herself earlier. Her expression remained neutral. Mr. Russo handles high-stakes negotiations personally. Sometimes they run long. But is he usually out of contact? A slight softening around her eyes betrayed a hint of sympathy. He'll be back, Ms. Hayes. He always is. The always struck me. How many nights had his security team spent waiting for his return from dangerous meetings? How many times had he walked into rooms with men like Donovan, where power and threat hung in the air like invisible smoke? Near 2 a.m, I'd worn myself out with worry and curled up on the sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw I'd found in a cabinet. I must have dozed off, because I startled awake to the sound of the security system announcing an arrival. Footsteps approached, heavier than I remembered, lacking Alessio's usual graceful stride. I sat up, heart pounding, as a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Alessio, but not as I'd ever seen him. His usual immaculate appearance was disrupted. Tie missing, collar open, a darkening bruise on his jaw. Most alarming was the smear of what looked like blood on his white shirt cuff. You're hurt, I said, rising to my feet. His eyes found mine, the amber darkened to almost black. It's not my blood. The statement should have frightened me. Instead, I felt a surge of relief that he was standing before me, essentially whole. Donovan? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Will no longer be a concern. His voice was cold, detached in a way I hadn't heard before. Then, seeing something in my expression, he added more gently, He's alive, Emma. But he understands his position now. I approached cautiously, as one might a wounded predator. What happened? Alessio moved to the bar, pouring himself 2 fingers of whiskey. He downed it in one swift motion before answering. Negotiations became physical. It happens occasionally in my line of work. You fought him? A humorless smile touched his lips. Let's say we had a forceful exchange of perspectives, facilitated by our respective security teams. I reached out hesitantly, my fingertips lightly touching the bruise forming on his jaw. He went perfectly still at the contact, his eyes locked on mine. You should ice this, I said softly. Something in his expression shifted, the coldness receding like frost under morning sun. Without a word, he caught my hand as I withdrew it, holding it gently in his much larger one. You waited up, he observed. I was worried. I admitted. His thumb traced a small circle against my palm, sending shivers up my arm. You shouldn't worry about me, Emma. I've survived much worse than Michael Donovan. That doesn't mean I can't care what happens to you. The words hung between us, more revealing than I'd intended. Alessio's eyes darkened further, but this time not with coldness, with something warmer, more dangerous. Is that what you do? Care what happens to me? His voice had dropped to that intimate tone that seemed reserved for me alone. I should have pulled away then, maintained the professional boundary he'd promised to respect. Instead, I found myself stepping closer. Against my better judgment, I whispered. Yes. The confession seemed to break something inside him. With a swiftness that took my breath away, he pulled me against him. One hand cradling the back of my head as his lips found mine. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. And I had imagined it, I realized, more than I'd admitted to myself. It wasn't demanding or possessive, but questioning, almost reverent. His lips moved against mine with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the power I knew he possessed. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, he rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that since you recommended that Barolo, he murmured. A small laugh escaped me. That's oddly specific. It was the moment I realized you were different. His hand moved to cup my cheek. You weren't trying to impress me or gain advantage. You were simply being yourself. I didn't know who you were, I reminded him. Exactly. His thumb brushed my lower lip. No pretense. No fear. Just you. With your tired eyes and your perfect wine recommendation and your refusal to be anything but authentic. I placed my hand over his, my mind racing with the implications of what was happening between us. This complicates everything. Everything worth having is complicated, Emma. His eyes held mine, serious and intent. The question is whether you want to explore those complications with me. The sincerity in his voice gave me courage. What happens if I say yes? What does that look like, with someone like you? It looks like whatever we decide it should. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I'm not offering a contract with predetermined terms. I'm offering a beginning with a man who comes home with blood on his shirt and bruises on his face, I pointed out. His expression sobered. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. My world has edges most people never see, but I can promise you this, with you, I will always be honest. I will always protect you, and I will never ask you to compromise who you are. His words resonated deep within me. After years of struggling alone, of putting everyone else's needs before my own, the promise of protection, of being valued for exactly who I was, held a seductive appeal I couldn't deny. When can I go back to my apartment? I asked, changing the subject slightly. If he was disappointed by my deflection, he didn't show it. Tomorrow, if you wish. Donovan has agreed to certain terms that ensure your safety. And my sister? Protected, as promised. Though she can be told it's a university security initiative if you prefer, she doesn't know the truth. I nodded, grateful for his understanding. And Carluccio's? Awaits its manager's return. A slight smile touched his lips. Though Anthony reports you've been remarkably effective even from here. I stepped back slightly, needing space to think clearly. I need time, Alessio. This has all happened so fast. The promotion, Donovan, this place, us. I need to find my footing. He nodded, respecting my boundaries without hesitation. Of course. Take whatever time you need. The only thing that changes is you're free to return to your normal life without looking over your shoulder. And us? I asked quietly. That's entirely your decision. His eyes held mine, sincere and unwavering. My interest hasn't changed. My patience hasn't wavered. If you're ready to explore what's between us, I'll be here. The promise in his voice sent warmth spreading through me. I reached up, gently touching the bruise on his jaw once more. You should really ice this. He caught my hand again, pressing a kiss to my palm, if you insist. 3 weeks later, Carluccio's was transformed. Under my management, with Alessio's backing, we'd implemented changes that had dramatically improved both service and profitability. Staff who'd initially resented my promotion had become allies as they witnessed my commitment to fairness and excellence. I'd moved to a new apartment, more secure, closer to the restaurant, with a spare room for when my sister visited. Alessio had offered to help with the expense, but I'd insisted on paying my own way, accepting only the salary that came with my legitimate position. We'd settled into an unexpected rhythm, professional during the day when he occasionally visited the restaurant, personal in the evenings when we would sometimes share dinner, talking for hours about everything and nothing. True to his word, he never pushed, never demanded, simply offering his company and his undivided attention when our schedules aligned. I learned more about him with each encounter. His passion for restoring vintage Italian motorcycles, his unexpected knowledge of Renaissance art, his habit of reading poetry late at night when sleep evaded him. He learned about me, too, my dreams of someday opening my own small cafe, my collection of vintage cookbooks, my weakness for 1940s film noir. The night everything changed was ordinary at first. Carluccio's had just closed after a busy Friday service. I was in my office reviewing the night's receipts when a knock came at my door. Alessio stood there, elegant as always in one of his impeccable suits, a small wrapped package in his hand. "I thought you were in New York until Sunday," I said, unable to hide my pleased surprise. "I concluded business early," he entered, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to give you this in person." The package was small, wrapped in cream-colored paper. I opened it carefully to find a vintage first edition of my favorite cookbook, one I'd mentioned in passing weeks earlier. "How did you remember this?" I asked, running my fingers over the embossed cover. "I remember everything you tell me, Emma." The simple statement carried weight beyond the words themselves. I set the book down carefully, emotion tightening my throat. Over these weeks, he'd shown me who he was beyond the power and danger. Thoughtful, intelligent, unexpectedly gentle in private moments. "I think I'm ready," I said quietly. He went perfectly still, as he often did in moments of significance. "Ready for?" "Us." I stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance we'd maintained. "Whatever complications that brings." Something flared in his amber eyes. Hope, desire, relief. "You're certain?" In answer, I rose on tiptoes and pressed my lips to his. Unlike our first kiss, this one held no hesitation, no question, only certainty and promise. When we finally broke apart, he cradled my face in his hands, his gaze intense. "I won't waste this chance, Emma. What's between us? It's rare. Precious." "I know," I whispered, understanding now what had been building since that first night when I'd fainted into his arms. Not just attraction or gratitude or fascination, but something deeper, a recognition of kindred spirits beneath our vastly different circumstances. Later that night, as Seattle's lights glittered beyond the windows of his Harbor Island home, I lay beside Alessio, his arm draped protectively across my waist. The journey from exhausted waitress to restaurant manager to this moment had been unpredictable and swift, yet somehow felt inevitable, as if all paths would have eventually led here, to this man whose strength and vulnerability mirrored my own. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, pressing a kiss to my shoulder. I turned to face him, tracing the now-healed mark on his jaw where Donovan's violence had left its temporary imprint. "That sometimes falling is the beginning, not the end." His eyes softened with understanding. "And sometimes the person who catches you is the one you've been waiting for all along." As his lips found mine once more, I surrendered to the truth of what we'd become. Two souls who had recognized in each other not just desire or advantage, but possibility. The world outside, with all its dangers and complications, would still be there tomorrow. But tonight, in the arms of the man who had seen my value when I was invisible to everyone else, I had found something I never expected when I fainted from exhaustion that fateful night. Not just a new beginning, but a home.